So we're back with another glossary video. This time we are talking about Abac, and we're joined by Dave Matthews and Aaron Fox from Archtis. And with these videos, we try and bring you sort of conversations around the latest trends in cybersecurity, and that's why Abac is something that we haven't really covered previously on these videos, but it is something that is quite important. So I think to get it started, we obviously said we've got Dave and Aaron. So, essentially, Dave, if you want to explain what is Abac.
Sure, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, so ABAC is attribute-based access controls. Um, Now, you might be familiar with role-based access controls, which is the traditional approach where we look at security groups, permissions on files and folders, and other data objects and similar there. And with role-based access, we're looking primarily just at the role of the individual, the permissions on the account, and similar there. With ABAC, we're actually looking at attributes both that apply to the content itself, so the data itself, and the user attributes. So when I talk about content attributes, I'm talking about the likes of of course, the permissions, the location of the document or file we're looking to access. We can be talking about content sensitivity. So if we've provided some form of classification, perhaps we've identified that using certain tools that we have when the data is created, or we're scanning and applying that data later using Microsoft Information Protection or similar labels there. And then you've also got other attributes such as the author, the security group that the user was from, who created that, and similar. So those make up content attributes. ABAC also looks at user attributes. So when we're talking about user attributes, we're talking about my permissions, my security clearance within the organization. Now, that security clearance may be based on my role, may be based on my competency with sensitive data and similar there. And then we're also looking at device. So am I coming in from a recognized authorized device? What software am I using? Is it a recognized browser that I'm attempting to download the file with? What location am I coming in from? Am I coming in on a secure network, a VPN connection? Am I logged in directly to the office, or am I logging in remotely? Perhaps I'm coming in from a Starbucks or a coffee shop down the road, or even am I logging in from a geographically separate location from where I'm expected? I'm outside of the UK. I'm actually logging in from Eastern Asia or similar there. Those are some of the attributes there for the user. So when we talk about ABAC, we're talking about the content and the user attributes, bringing those together, and that gives us some context around the accessibility of the data itself. To give you an example of that in practice, right now I'm logged in via a company laptop and I'm connected using a VPN. So I have access to files and folders that I'm authorized to see. Some of this will contain sensitive data around our organization. But what happens is after this call, perhaps I head down the road to my coffee shop, I take my phone and I want to catch up just on some of those documents that I was reviewing. So I open this up on my phone while I'm waiting for my coffee to be brewed. What happens, of course, is I'm now connected via an Android device. Perhaps it isn't recognized. I'm using the Google software that was installed on that device, so that isn't recognized. I'm logged in from a public location, could be 5G. I could be using the public Wi-Fi there, and of course, being in a public location means I'm also perhaps surrounded by people that I'm not actually familiar with, and so we might have some concerns over who could be looking over my shoulder. In that case, what ABAC can do is we can actually change the visibility of what I can see. You know, what can I still see all 50 files in the folder that I was accessing from the home office, or am I now restricted just to open perhaps the 5 files that haven't been classified as sensitive that are considered safe for public consumption? Um, and with ABAC, you can also take a look and say, well, let's apply some separate controls here. Let's allow Dave access to these files, but now they're only visible in read-only mode. Perhaps we're going to change some of the controls around that. We're going to apply dynamic watermarks, or even if I download this to my device, we're going to apply some encryption so this data is protected at rest, regardless of what other software is installed on my own personal device.
Great. I think that's a really important thing to consider, especially with the sort of shift to remote working we've seen over the last 2 years. I'm sure people are fairly fed up of hearing about the shift to hybrid working and remote working, but it's still an important topic to consider. Especially I think moving beyond the pandemic, hopefully if we ever transition out of it, we will see remote working being more of an option in the long term, not because it's forced. Hopefully more it's more of an option for businesses. They see it's a cost saving solution, more provide people with more flexibility. I guess ABAC just covers the security issues around that. Anything to add on that, Aaron, at all?
Not really, no. I think I'd just sort of summarize it by saying exactly as Dave pointed out there, that what you're really doing is combining user and content attributes to determine not only can somebody access it, but how do they access it, where do they access it from, and all those various things. So it's all about granular policy enforcements that you don't get with the traditional things like role-based access, where it's kind of one-dimensional and it's understanding of who's trying to do something and why they're trying to do it.
And do you see any particular sort of industries at all that should probably have an ABAC policy in place more than others, or is it something you'd recommend to everyone?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think really when you look at where ABAC comes from, it's all about understanding and mitigating risk. And so any industry where they are particularly exposed to certain risks that could be specific in nature. So if you say pharmaceutical or research companies, or also if you look at it from a financial legal perspective, they tend to be the sweet spot, I would say. But equally, when you look at perhaps smaller organizations or ones that aren't specifically highly regulated, which are the ones that always get spoken about, you look at, say, HR information, for example. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, if HR data is exposed, and by that, perhaps a disciplinary document that's being worked on, or somebody's salary information, if that gets leaked to somebody else in the organization, that has massive ramifications. And so really it's more about understanding where the risk comes from to sensitive data, and then thinking of specific examples where ABAC can help to apply the relevant policies, as opposed to the sort of traditional way of looking at data security, which is focusing all attention or resources on the highly regulated sectors of the market.
Okay, so with that, is it scalable? Can you choose how many policies you have in place? How does that look? So compare, say, a non-profit charity or education sector who potentially have a more restricted budget and different needs compared to, like you say, a finance or a legal firm who have much more personal sensitive business critical information. How does that look in terms of putting it in place?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, when you look at the way that the attributes are factored into this policy, because essentially it's just an access control methodology. And so whether you make that very simple and very specific to certain use cases, or whether you make the rules more general, or very, very detailed, are completely up to the organization that we work with. And I think the interesting thing that we find often is that there's certain government entities that we work with that we would expect to have very, very granular, detailed ABAC policies in place, and they often have the most simple ones because it's just focused at one use case. And so I think what we tend to find is that in the organizations that don't have specific regulations or specific scenarios in which they need to apply rules, they tend to have more generic things. So it's more an understanding of who's trying to access it, where they're accessing it from, what device they're connected to, geographically what location they're in, and those various things. And you can kind of use those as a generic policy that can be applied across the board to detect on something obvious. Dave used the example a minute ago. If somebody was accessing something from the wrong geographical location, that's not a specific example, and it doesn't really matter what you're trying to access. If you're meant to be based in London and you're trying to access this from, let's not pick on anybody. If you say New York or Singapore or whatever it might be, then anywhere outside of London is incorrect, and so we can pick up on those things. And so I think the job for us really is to determine, based on the companies that we're working with and the specific use cases they have, the best way to deploy this in the way that is scalable, and obviously with the quickest time to value.
Cool, fantastic. Well, thank you very very much both of you for your time this afternoon. I guess any questions, you can reach out to us at Threat Protect or Archtis, and if you want to find out more information, I'm guessing you guys can do some sort of demonstration of the platform if that's requested.
Absolutely, of course.
Perfect.
Happy to jump on a call.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both, and thank you for watching.